career is my biggest interest, but
honestly,
like service design.
the strategy and actually talking to
Strategy.
people, not because I'm overly social or anything, but because I just feel that
Yeah, I don't really like
the process
push on
that at this stage you
How things been going?
service design.
Pretty good.
But the closest to that.
Are they? Yeah. Are things getting better, Greg?
Getting better? Yes.
Is it the
Yes.
We're actually
product
in a good
design?
space.
You should be at the other
What's that?
Product design is
more products.
a product.
Not project.
Whereas service
That's great.
design might just be like, oh, let's reconfigure the pieces or introduce.
It's a good first step.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Nice change.
Well, I'm hearing that we're
yeah, I mean,
Oh, yeah.
Log in.
Yeah, it's just a matter of how eventually it's
That sounds like
it would be really cool. I don't know if that would be
It is, like, especially there's a lot of, there are a lot
They call it ethnographic. Everybody does
impact really positive service design is much more established in countries with more social
A lot of
Sounds like you guys are also
large
starting to
government
have
entities trying to deliver services.
Yeah, so I had the budget. Yeah, it was in,
Right, and they have to
did Jack talk to you about, we did the alcohol delivery thing,
getting
a
better
heartbeat.
He said 6 days.
They're so heavily invested in.
And I've always been
One of those was Sunday.
Wow.
So like,
So here's
people aren't finishing their
here's what we were working on alcohol
their
delivery, but just as like
medicine,
a
they're
relatively
antibiotic.
it's different trajectories, different
So
Jag and
that's one thing that's
I'm trying to find some good media
medicine.
talking about UX strategy.
Friday afternoon, they even called me first thing in the morning. They were like, hey, Keith, I heard this like,
Why are they finishing their medicine?
you know, Amazon launched out
They
constantly.
not know, you might uncover that they're like
They're always operational.
attitudes around medicine that are like they want to take as little as they can get better.
How fast?
One thing that I have heard is with a specific case,
2 weeks in Martin.
medicine
How about by
pretty low evaluate, so they're very
And I was like, I looked at my watch and I looked at the date.
I'm not going to multiply it. You know, they're not just going
June
to go
27th? Are you talking about like 5 days from now?
Right, and that's the same thing we see in like
No, you know,
free events versus
absolutely
paid
not.
events. If you ask them to pay $2,
And Jack was like, I think we can do it by Friday of next
they'll
week.
still come. They're more likely to come.
No, and so what we did was we listed all the things that we needed, that we're going to get, right? Like all the programs
Things.
and I guess
Service designer would do that. Like, so one thing my friend Sim was working on recently was, well, right now he's
together
working
and
on
they just like bring down the
issue and
decisions
so
that
he's
are
like mapping out what is the
It's
landscape.
like, well, here you go, like call it
Trading
off.
population, yeah.
Like, here you go, get it done. Our team, like,
Right, it's really concentrated downtown because we drove past kind of close to where the shelter is.
stayed in.
Yeah, you wouldn't see it in the dome.
We got it, submitted it Wednesday night, and then I got
Kind of understanding like there
expected stays in
are issues around.
Come on, like, this is the thing.
We're that close to the finish line.
We were ready with
Challenging, like,
Android,
existing
but we needed
kind of
Apple to get through, because otherwise we'd have just
And like what happens if your stuff
really like 40% of our user base, and it would have been like,
pet,
it would have
like
put
pet
the
safety and
service at
well-being
risk.
and healthcare is a big thing they heard is a big issue.
And then Jag, you know, they called us to
Also,
contact that Apple. She didn't even pick
like
up,
phones
but
are
apparently
like a challenge.
either she got
Like,
stuff through or
you
Apple
get a phone, it's a
contacted me.
phone number,
Yeah.
and then you give your phone number to your caseworker, your social employer, or
Keith and
whatever.
I called
And then
Martin and we were
run
like,
out
we're
of
a go, and then we launched on Friday. It was stupid. It was amazing. It was,
That person has
it
nothing
was,
to do with you, and so like you're set back again.
we had done a little bit of usability testing upstream, but it was, the consumer side was hard. It was actually the run side. Like, it was all about the compliance, getting them, because we had to train, we had to teach 25,000 runners how to scan an ID at the door. It was something that they've never done before. And so we just had to put an experience in our side that was good enough. And then there are all these like restrictions that we never had to build before that we have to I'm also on the cross county. Right.
I remember hearing that.
Our system doesn't know about counties, so we had to teach it about counties, right? So
I didn't know that
I
was
had to
like
figure out a way to do that.
field of work existed.
There's like a little bit of like permitting returning goods. We had never returned anything.
There's it describes this as
So we had to add a
Right,
stage to
it's
favor
like really not well known even within
and figure out a way to
visual
compensate
designers.
customers more than glass.
Especially in the United States. much.
So accounting and everything else.
Yep. Legal, update our terms of service.
Wow.
What else did he work
Yeah, it
on?
was fun.
Just
It was a fun week.
understanding
And then I
the
moved on
permitting
Friday.
process. for
That
it.
was like very, yeah.
Plan that well.
Yeah, the best part about it, the funniest thing that happened.
What steps you, like, no one knew.
So this was just like, I was like,
steps.
yeah, definitely not.
Person. And
So I was just like,
person would
I hadn't slept all week,
then one
you
of
know,
those
so
also
I'm like moving, putting beds
to your class, bouncing around.
And we launched at 10 a.m. and
Basically,
one of our engineers wrote a script that as part of setting the things live, they
permit
ordered
reviewer
a
can
favor
later be overturned by another
cleared off
reviewer
ice.
to just interpret the code differently.
And it was like a scripted favor, and they put all these instructions in the runner to like ice me.
Approved.
Oh,
So
yeah,
they like
yeah.
give you a smeared off ice and you have to chug it.
Yeah.
And so, so a runner came into my house, it's empty. The movers are at my old house.
Well, I can share an example of what happened.
I'm at the new house. She's at the old house. And this guy comes in with an HEB bag and he's like, PJ, get on your knees. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? I'm being robbed or something, you know? And he was like, ice serious. And he like handed me
And like that time. We got it approved, permitted everything. Plans, built it out. Great.
the
Had it
alcoholic
running for 2
beverage
years, no problem.
at 10 in the morning.
Then we get
Totally worth it. Worth the story.
notification from code compliance that someone has complained because it is a waiting
How many engineers?
and under that provision of the code or whatever, waiting
We were able to get 2 engineers for our whole Android team. One iOS
Yeah,
because the other
so
guy
we
was
had
in
to
Vegas.
basically make it so the kids wouldn't get in
Tune
there.
back and make a hire.
Well, we had to like put a big plan script in the middle of it and like, you know, invest
Yeah.
more money into
Turn it into something else.
That's,
Right.
that's like half our team.
And it was
So,
like, you need to tell me like,
So it's
you
already
approved,
Yeah.
so you approved it and now it's not
There's
approved, but nothing's changed.
Yeah, so it was just your
yeah, as a, I think like an amoeba, is that an organization?
Right.
Blob.
And so that, like, that sort of thing happened.
Which is kind of messed up because you.
Yeah, I
time and
mean,
money
like
building it.
realistically, we're just, it's
And
like
we're
the
not compensated for
Right,
that.
exactly.
And that sort of story
now
is
having
like,
happened to not be working.
and he was doing the service now with like what
So we can take
system was,
everything
and he left this
today,
big gap of,
nothing
like,
else
well,
matters,
here's where
this
it
will
gets like
go.
ultimately decided.
And it's not scalable, and it's not
And
something
ultimately,
that
there is no, there's nothing there.
but you can do it every now. Yeah.
There's no truth.
And our team actually loved it. The engineers actually.
Oh, you did?
They were, I mean, him and Todd, and
Yeah.
you know, they like give this like more to go get entire speech. But they did it, and it went on Sunday. Yeah, yeah, we had.
I went.
Yeah, I think for some reason I thought they said
I'm over it.
you're over it.
Hey, thanks for coming out tonight. My name is Douglas Ferguson, founder of Voltage Control. We facilitate design sprints as well as other workshops. And happy to have PJ, head of product from Favor tonight. I facilitated a design sprint with these guys a few months back and was really impressed by the team and had a blast doing it. So PJ's going to share some of the insights that they gained and the experience they had. Also want to point out that the next meetup is only 3 weeks away because this one got shifted due to July 4th. So August 1st, Eli in the back of the room, as a prototype designer here at Voltage Control, is going to be sharing a tutorial about how we create collaborative prototypes. So we often have clients that have big expectations on the amount of prototyping that can get done in one day. And so we're often having to move in parallel. So using collaborative tools to essentially work on the same prototype at the same time and do automatic merging and these kinds of things. So he's going to walk everyone through a hands-on tutorial on that. That'll be August the 1st. And then also, Jake Knapp's going to be returning to Austin on September 13th. And that's going to be at the Native Hostel. I'm still working out some last-minute details, but the ticketing system should be up in the next day or two, and I'll send out a notice on that. So without further ado, PJ.
Thanks. Thank you.
Hi everybody, my name's again PJ. I'm with Favor Delivery, head of product there. I've been there for about 3 years. Had the pleasure of doing a design sprint with Douglas, and I guess it was not team at that point, it was just you. Just was here to share. He asked if I would share the experience. It was a really good experience. It's like I was telling Douglas before I came out here that I can actually mark the design sprint and the way that we did design before and the way that we do design since. It's not like we're doing design sprints every week, but you'll see like the team really kind of embrace this idea of early prototyping, showing things to users, and it's just kind of naturally built into our process. They're pulling us in that direction, which is so cool. So happy to answer any questions. I don't prepare like a script or anything when I present to these sort of things. So if anything comes up, just raise your hand or shout it out or yell at me or throw something or whatever, and that's totally cool. Cool? So how many of you are familiar with Favor, just so I get a sense? Okay, great. I'm going to make a code, by the way, for everybody who's here. So if you type in Design Sprint into the Favor app, you can get $10 off delivery credit.
Thank you.
What's that?
You spent so much money on you guys.
Well, thank you. We appreciate you very much.
Drug addict.
Yeah, it is. It is. You see it in our numbers too. We are like an addictive drug. So Favor is Texas's own on-demand delivery service. So we like to consider ourselves the best rated service, but that's just based on App Store reviews. That doesn't really, like, anyone can say that. We were founded in June 2013 by a couple of pizza delivery bros, and I say that with affection. They were from New Hampshire. They were in school in California. They got some funding in an incubator there and moved to Austin specifically to start the company. Ben Doherty and Zach Murai, they're great dudes. They're on to their next startup now. In 2015, they basically had taken a big Series A, were trying to expand the company, realized that they didn't know what to do yet, and they asked to bring in like what they would call a professional CEO, or at the time they asked for just a grown-up. That was when they brought in my boss. His name's Jack Bath. I'd worked with him at Retail Me Not, and he called me up. At the time I was at Evernote, and he said, hey, do you want to get the band back together? And of course I said no. And then after years and convincing, I came on in 2015, and we've been kind of running things together ever since. So that's where we're at. We've grown the team now. We're about 200 employees. It says 200 plus up on the slide, which I'm surprised to see. I just got this slide today. That 200 plus was crossed on Monday, so we're like at 201. And in February, so last year we became the first on-demand company, a company that looks like us, to be profitable, which was great. That was a huge accomplishment for us. We then decided, okay, we're going to go out and raise a big Series C and roll up a bunch of companies that look like us and become a public company. That was the plan. And then our friends at HEB came along and said, hey, how about instead of doing that, let's join forces, and you can be Texas. You can focus on Texas, go really deep here, and be Texas's best delivery brand. And so that's what we're doing now. So we joined forces with HEB in February of this year. It's been great. We've got some of my colleagues here, my new colleagues, and we're kind of continuing to march forward as Favor Delivery. And our goal is to just be the best damn company at this in Texas. And F y'all, we're from Texas. You know, that's kind of our motto. So that's where we're at. So I want to talk a little bit about, a lot of you definitely have seen product at Favor from the consumer side. And that's actually when Jag called me. My first hesitation to work at Favor was like, I'm not really interested in helping rich people get their tacos. That doesn't sound like the most exciting problem for me to solve. I was at Evernote, and it was really cool because it was a free product. It's 100,000 new users every day. It was used for all kinds of crazy stuff, and it was a democratized product, and it felt like really accessible. And I was like, well, you know, Favor's kind of a luxury product. And he was like, dude, you're thinking about this all wrong. We're a runner product. We're changing the way people make money. And that's really what we do at Favor. We had this, like, if anybody interviews for a product manager job at Favor, you have to let me know that I'm cheating. But we have this like joke interview question at Favor. It's like an inside joke. We're like, okay, we just acquired a drone service, and we can deliver tacos with drones. Design that into the product now. And the product manager and the designers will go back and forth. The truth of the matter is, we're a runner company, so if drones started delivering tacos, we would just figure out something for our people to do. You know, like we're a people company, and we just happen to deliver food because that's what people do want 3 times a day. If that goes away, then we're just going to find something else awesome for our people to do, because our product is our runners, right? And that resonated really strongly with me, and that's really how we're formed. So we're like, although Favor is a consumer brand, and we spend a lot of our time, I'd say 25% working on the consumer side, the other 75% is all about the runners and helping them deliver great service and helping them make more money. The day that we can pay a runner another $1 is a good day. And so a lot of what I'm talking about today is our design sprint was around the runner app. It wasn't even around the consumer app. So we'll be talking more about runners than anything else. So product at Favor, we actually have 15 distinct consumer, merchant, runner, and internal facing products that our team manages. Anybody guess how big, 200 employees, anybody can guess how big our product team is? Not engineers, so product managers and designers. 3?
Go with 10.
Yeah.
5? It's 4. It's 4, between 3 and 5, yeah, it's 4. Me, one other product manager, a head of UX and research, and one visual product designer. We're responsible, we have 15 engineers, so 1 engineer per product. And it's not really organized that way, but that's the size of our team. And we manage 4 consumer products: Android, iOS, mobile web, and web. So those are all effectively the same thing, but just presented on different platforms. And so, of course, they have to be different code bases. Runner product, we have 2 runner apps, web and iOS. That's like what the runner uses to deliver the favors. That's like the thing that they launch that gets them the tacos to go buy. And that's what we're going to be talking about most today. So those are those 2 here. Those 2. Those are the products we're going to be talking about today. We also have runner tools, which is where they manage their like deposits and schedules and that sort of stuff. And then we have a whole application process that's like, I mean, we're going to be onboarding like over 100,000 runners over the next 2 years. And so they go through this application process. Insights and Favor Fleet are merchant-facing products, so we work with merchant partners. They pay us a commission to feature them in our app and drive them more sales. So we have one way to show them how much sales they've done, and another way for them to place a favor on behalf of their customer. It's kind of like a product targeted at pizza companies that don't want to like quote an hour and 45 minutes as their delivery time. And then our internal tools are really kind of what makes the whole thing go. So it's like our support team, our content team, and everybody. Well, this is all bespoke, made from scratch. We don't do a lot using off the shelf. We've kind of built a lot up from scratch over time. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit like these tools and just how they stitch together, just to give you a sense of how Favor works. Without that, it's hard to understand what we do with this product. So these are our first thing that we're looking at is our what we call our content tools. This basically looks at Google Maps and says, hey, where's all the restaurants by this name? And then our content team can go add the locations, and it'll pull things like pricing and hours and stuff from Google Maps. We'll augment that with a bunch of Favor-specific data, and that's how things get into our app, like restaurants and stores and that sort of thing. We're technically order anything. You can order from anywhere, but we try to help people along the way to order from like, you know, every Target, every Starbucks, every H-E-B is in the Favor app, and we have to have people who add those because we can't just scrape Google. That's like illegal and immoral. Second thing is Content Tools does is our marketing team goes in here and manages all of our promotions across all of our markets that we're in, because we're a local company. We work with local restaurants, so it doesn't work to just like scale them across. Sure, we do promotions for Chick-fil-A, but the vast majority of them are like the mom and pop place around the corner. Those are most of our partners, and so each market has to be set up separately. So this is the Content Tools where they do that. Those 2 things come together, and that's what populates the Favor consumer app with content when you launch it. So up at the top, if you think the top is marketing and the bottom is content, you're not too far off. But that's basically how the Favor consumer app works. It pulls from our content system. Teams upload menus and locations and all those things, and then you've got a bunch of cool restaurants and great pictures to choose from. On the runner side, there's this is the whole other part of the community. So this runner is choosing when they want to work. So you choose what part of town you want to run in, you choose what hours you want to run. We open up availability, and then if a runner shows up and they don't make a guaranteed minimum, we guarantee them a minimum earnings just to make sure that they're protected against too many people showing up, right? So this is what you're seeing over here is a web product. It's React and responsive from desktop to mobile. But this is where runners manage like their earnings, their deposits, all that stuff. So it's kind of like offline runner tools. And then we also have, so then here's the runner app. So this runner's already applied. So this runner app is launching. They're choosing what part of town they want to run in. They're going to go, I think, in central Austin. And then they're on the network, and they're here ready to take favors. So we have, in Austin right now, I would guess, let's see, what time is it? Oh, it's dinner time. So we'll probably have 300 or 400 runners running actively in Austin right now. Another 300 or 400 in Houston, another 300 or 400 in Dallas, and then smaller markets like College Station, San Marcos will have 50 to 100 running at any given time. 25,000 or so active runners each month. So pretty big community of people. At this point, then, the runner shows up on our internal tools. This is where our support team, they call them like the moderators of the markets, are kind of like watching everything, making sure everything runs correctly. So what you're seeing right here is a map of San Antonio, and they can kind of click a runner and see where they're at and where they're going and make sure that they're moving in the right direction. If a favor sits for too long, it turns red, and the team reaches out and addresses it and tries to get out a new runner. So we're always watching to try to make sure every favor runs perfectly. Always failing at that endeavor, but that's like the goal. We're trying to get every delivery to go really well. So then the customer on the left asks for some Tyson's tacos in this case. That goes through our assignment algorithm and then matches it up with the right runner. We take into account all kinds of factors, where the runner is, what their vehicle type is, what the order is, whether or not they've been idle for a long time, whether or not they've had a good shift or a bad shift. There's a bunch of information that goes into making this decision, but the gist of it is we try to pick a good runner, right? Once the runner is picked, their job is to keep that customer up to date. So those of you who use Favor, you probably have noticed that you get texts from runners. We encourage them to be fun and include their personality and include like crazy emojis and that sort of stuff, send you memes. No one ever said delivering a pizza was fun, and we're really trying to make getting food delivered fun. So this is like the biggest part of it. It's what makes every experience a little bit different. It's the personality of our runners. It's part of what they love about doing it, but it also is great for our customers too. This goes through our API because we anonymize those communications back and forth. So we use Twilio to mask those numbers to each other, and then we basically route everything from runner to customer and back again. This wasn't always the case, which was a bad thing, but now it is the case, which is a good thing. Questions so far? No? Yeah.
How do you mentioned monitoring the mood of a runner?
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Whether or not they're having a good shift.
Yeah.
It's different than mood.
Sorry,
good shift, we use like quantitative data, like how have their tips been so far. And if they're having a bummer shift and we have a good customer and they're a good runner, we try to match them up. It's basically just trying to make sure that every runner doesn't, like by law of averages, just get screwed over and over again, because like we're trying to take care of them and trying to make sure that they end, like if they're close to the end of their shift, we try to give them a good favor so that they finish happy. That's like one of the fun little life hack that we have, because like, oh, now they'll remember that they're happy, they'll forget all that crap. The other crazy system that we have is our payment system. So every runner carries, I think I have mine with me, Marqeta card. Yeah, there it is, it's my runner card. So I run every couple of weeks just to like kind of keep up with it. Everyone at Favor does. I'm not novel in this. We all encourage everybody to run 3 hours a month just to like keep up runner empathy and know what's going on. But that's our runner card. So the runner shows up at the store. We know you're the runner. We know where you are. We know where you're supposed to be going. We know what the items are. And then when the MasterCard swipes, it hits our system, asks like, is this cool? We say, yes, this is cool. And then it goes back down to the terminal and passes it through. At that point, then we send a silent push notification to the app so that the runner doesn't even have to type the price. The terminal basically sets the price in the runner's app, and this all happens in a couple hundred milliseconds. It's pretty sweet. That system replaced another system that wasn't nearly as good, and that replaced our founder meeting runners on the corner with cash. Then finally, at the end of the whole thing, the consumer tips the runner. They can raise their tip, which Mark got a good tip here, and that goes through Stripe, our totally separate Rails payment system from the consumer merchant. At this point, when the customer asks the favor, we have to do all kinds of awesome fraud checks, because if an astute observer will notice that we pay for the tacos long before you pay us back for the tacos, which puts us on the hook for the tacos. That sucks, because if you default on that little microloan, now all of a sudden, instead of the $8 or so in revenue we were going to gain, or the $4 in profit, we owe $35. So we have to run a bunch of favors to make up for that stuff. So, so that's basically like another system that I don't even call out here, but it's like our fraud prevention system. And we've got a bunch of others that are like that, but that's basically what our team does. So any questions about that before I go into design sprints?
How many iterations have you had of the different systems tweaking?
How many iterations of the different systems? Every day we release twice. So if that's an iteration, like that's either fixing something that's broken pretty often, or improving on something and then fixing it once we break it. So that happens twice a day, Monday through Thursday. We try not to release on Friday, and not on weekends mostly. Yeah?
Do you do that through A/B testing at all, or you just go ahead and implement?
Both. Most of the time when we can and when we should, we A/B test. So A/B tests we use in two ways. One is to like measure the impact of something. The other is more of like a protective, like preventative measure to mitigate risk. When you're talking about the scale that we're working at, you know, it's tens of thousands of orders a day, but we have to wait a while to get to significance unless it's like a major change in A/B tests. So we only A/B test stuff that is like main line, main path things go through. So we'll be running, we probably have 6 or 7 A/B tests live right now that are collecting data. Good question. Yeah?
I'm curious about, you said about sometimes you lose money from some of the transactions. How does that work? Because you have to have like your card already saved into the system.
Good question.
Do you ever actually have like someone's card goes default?
So you have to pinky swear never to take advantage of this. But here's what happens. When you place the favor, let's say you order, I don't know, you need a wild hair and you're like, I need to get like a vacuum cleaner from Walmart, right? I have no idea how much a vacuum cleaner, I have some idea, right? I can estimate, but my systems have no idea how much a vacuum cleaner from Walmart costs. And so what we do is we pre-auth your card for some amount, let's say 50 bucks, right? To check to see whether or not you have any money on there.
Okay.
And then we immediately reverse that transaction and give it back to you. Because we don't, if you're over 50 bucks, we can't capture more than that based on a pre-auth. So this is a lot of detail, sorry. So basically what we do is we just ping the card to see whether or not it has money. And the amount that we check for is based on data from past orders, but it might not be right. Then, let's say that the vacuum costs $100. So the runner swipes the card, we now know it's $100, and we charge you $100. Let's say you had $74 on your card. That initial pre-auth succeeds, and then the $100 charge fails. We don't get that 50 bucks, we don't get the 100 bucks, we get just the middle finger from you. And so now we're on the hook because we already paid Walmart, so that money's out of our account, and we just now harass you until you pay us back.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's kind of based on an assumption that order that you're not used to getting, you just kind of assume.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just throw $50 and hope that that's.
Yeah, it's a lot of hoping.
Gotcha.
It's amazing how often it works, believe it or not. Yeah.
Does the runner then return that good?
No, we don't know that. We don't know that you didn't pay because you don't pay until after we do the delivery. I feel like I'm now streaming a great way to take advantage of our system. Lots of fraud protection to stop people from doing such things. We've come a long, long way. But yeah, that's awesome. Forgot we were streaming. Hope no one's watching. Other questions? Anything else you'd like me to share, like what the how to break into the office? Yeah, the admin password for IT.
If anybody's recording, I'll take a copy of that video.
Yeah. Cool. All right, well, I'm going to move on to the design sprint then. Is this anyone's first design sprint meetup? Yeah. Okay, cool. So if you're not familiar, design sprints are this awesome thing Google Ventures came up with. It's effectively, and the shortest way to describe it is it's a 5-day like standard framework to get from an idea to a validated prototype in 5 days, right? And they have like a thing that you do each day, and I'm going to walk through how we did it. We did it in 4 because of course we had to do it faster than 5, but we followed the process that was outlined by the Google Ventures team. So Google Ventures was the venture arm of Google. How long ago did Google Ventures Ventures start? Like 2007, 2008, somewhere in there? Yeah, and they invested in tons of startups, and they're really bright guys, and they figured out by working with all these startups what works and what doesn't, and then they built like this great framework. It's awesome. So I first got exposure to it at Retail Me Not. They were a Google Ventures backed company, and we ran a design sprint there. Always wanted to run another one, and then when I came to Favor and got to be in charge of stuff, I was like, hey, let's run one here. So I'm going to talk through what we did at Favor and how it turned out. So we did a modified sprint schedule. So we did 4 days instead of 5. So it was like Tuesday, we kind of agreed on a goal and refined our target. I think we combined day 1 and day 2 into Tuesday, if I remember correctly. I'm not a design sprint like theologian or whatever. I'm not an expert in design sprints and those sort of things, but I know what we did. So Wednesday we examined our sketches, and then it says combined ideas and a solution to prototype. I'll go through all this in detail. Thursday we assigned the roles and worked out. So Thursday is all about building the prototype, and Friday is all about showing it to users and getting feedback. It's really kind of cool because it's been a couple of months since we did this. I think it was like in April maybe, and a lot of these designs, I hadn't revisited them until like putting together these slides. A lot of these designs we've like refined and tested again, and some of them are being built right now, which is super fun because this is how they came. It was like basically like you get a cross-functional team into a room and you say come up with something awesome, and they do. It's really cool. So there's Douglas. That's Favor in the background. That's our office. Which who you see here is on the guy whose arms. That's our product designer Cooper. The guy with the beard is Jacob. He's head of runner success, which is like our runner support org. Meg is our head of UX and research. Alex Koshi is our lead iOS developer. And then I think that is probably Elon right there. He's the other product manager on my team, and the girl with her back to us is our social media person and kind of like voice of Favor, Laura. So we built a relatively strong cross-functional team, and they decided on a goal. And so in our case, our goal was, and this is Tuesday, increase the average hourly earnings of runners by 10% while decreasing the runners who indicate that running is frustrating by 50%. So you can imagine that being a delivery driver can be frustrating in many ways. And so a big goal of this was to just kind of help runners have an easier time at their jobs, but then also increase their earnings by making them more efficient. That was the strategy that we took with this. Any questions so far?
It sounds like design thinking boot camp.
Yeah.
Like a design thinking boot camp.
Yeah, that's it very much is. And it takes a huge problem that you have and just it's like how do you eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time. It just gives you the places and means with which to eat the elephant, right? It's very helpful. Yeah.
So your runners, do most of them prefer running the downtown area or the suburban areas?
That's a good question. They prefer running where they're busy most of the time. Our runners tend to just hustle and they'll chase the favors wherever they can. It's funny, you don't think of pizza delivery drivers as somebody who's particularly bright or entrepreneurial, but there's something special about somebody who decides I'm gonna do this thing that's kind of weird, that I'm gonna download an app and start to make money that way, and I'm gonna be my own boss, and I'm gonna be service oriented. It's takes a special type, and they end up just hustling. They're amazing. I love our runners. They're so much fun to be around. Yeah.
So one of the things I've seen a lot of companies struggle is clearing the schedule for people to be a part of the sprint.
Yeah.
How do you guys deal with that negotiation if you can tell them yo, can you cover for them more?
You just clear it. I mean, you just do it. It's you have to. It's just like anything else. Time isn't something that anyone has. Time is something that you make for things, right? And so when something is important, you make time for it. Vacation is important. People make time to go on vacation. They take a week off all the time, right? So you just figure out a way to make time for this thing because you have to convince the people whose job you're taking away that it's really important. We're a design company. We're a product company, so it's really easy for me. I didn't have a big challenge there. Questions? Yeah. Go ahead, and then you.
Yeah. How did you guys arrive at the 10% and 50% for the goal?
I think it was something like this. Yeah, it was just to kind of give a sense of order of magnitude of scale. If we got 7%, that would be a win, but 10% feels like a good. We're not trying to triple their earnings. That would be absurd. It's a totally different solution set,
You're
right?
not banking
Than
on
like
it, right.
increasing gradually over time. But like if we increase it by 1% or 2%, they're just not going to feel it. So we thought 10% was the minimum amount that they would feel.
Cool.
So do runners in,
No, go ahead. No, go ahead, and then we'll go next.
do you have a survey? Where do they indicate whether or not they're frustrated?
We have post-shift surveys, like how was your shift, and then NPS is another way. And then we just survey our runners all the time. They're a pretty engaged community. It's nice because they're like a user base that really care about the product, like a very passionate user base because it's how they make money. And so when we ask them questions, they just answer. Yeah.
That's what I was going to ask you.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so Meg, our head of UX and research, they conduct runner surveys all the time. And it's really like, the goal would be like, should we move forward with this, we would put a baseline in place that would be like, how was this? And it's kind of like thumbs up or thumbs down. Was this frustrating? And then earnings we know because we know. Right? Okay, cool.
How related are those two things from your perspective? Like,
they're related, but not correlated.
okay.
So we could solve one without the other, but we tried to figure out a way to solve, and we could hurt earnings and make it less frustrating, right? But we wanted to make sure that we didn't do any harm. In fact, we improved both, and we think that there are solutions for both. Yeah.
I'm going to reword my question previous.
Okay.
What is more frustrating for the runners, to run in downtown locations or going straight to office?
That depends on the runner, but the runner frustrations can stem from all kinds of crazy things. But I would say that the top level themes are, one, runners tend to feel like they don't have the information that they need when they need it. So our app is like, basically we give you all the information, we say figure it out, runner, because you're smart. We don't it's not like a progressive disclosure thing, so that was one of the things that you'll see in the solutions that we proposed, right, is to chunk up information and give it to the person when they need it, so be a little bit more contextual with things. The other is we rely a lot on our runners to do things that machines could do, and so it's kind of like take some of that manual tapping of buttons out. When we know your location, we don't have to ask you if you left the store, we can just do that, right? So that's one of the biggest frustrations for runners. And then the other is isolation. So it's funny because you choose this thing, but you drive around in your car, you listen to music, you text people, it gets kind of lonely. Runners identify as part of a runner community, and when they hang out in restaurants, you'll see, like, pay attention if you see favorite runners, they'll all group over in a little corner and they'll chat with each other. They share this, like, they think of themselves as like part of a service industry. Anybody who's worked at a restaurant knows that, like, I worked in restaurants for years. It's like a little group of people, right? Like, it's like your people. Yeah, it's your clique, and it's like you against the people you're serving all the time, right? And these are the people these are the only ones who understand the same crap that you deal with every day. And runners really do feel that. You see it in, like, virtual ways, and we have meetups and, like, we talk with people, but one of the other things that we would try to do is make the job feel a little bit less isolated, right? Yeah?
How does weather affect app usage and runners and things like that? Like, how drastic is that?
Good question. I would say the biggest challenge that we have as a company is balancing supply and demand. Even if we could wave a magic wand and have these independent contractors show up when and where we wanted them, if it rains, our demand goes up 15% and our supply goes down 15%. And so we're screwed every time. And so we have to, like, watch weather forecasting is built into our systems of predictive analytics to figure out how many runners to schedule for next week.
I mean, it's a good thing we're in Texas. If I'm curious to know in areas that snows, like, if that just adds like another factor.
It's a good thing we're in Texas, except Texas weather sucks, and no one ever can tell you when it's gonna rain. Yeah, we were in Boston and Toronto, and it was awful. Because for two reasons. One, those are really densely populated cities, and so how we tend to combat that is have bike runners. What do bike runners hate more than anything? Snow and ice, right? So we would just have days where nobody would show up to run favors, and we'd have to close. That sucked. Luckily, yeah, we're in Texas, so we don't have to solve that problem very often, but we still have to deal with weather. Like last week in Houston, we had, like, flood stuff, right? And during Hurricane Harvey, it was crazy because we couldn't get anyone anywhere, and everybody needed stuff. And so we try to err in the direction, like, obviously keep runners safe. That's the most important thing. But then But then, like the same thing that makes you want to, like if it's cold out or hot out or whatever, if it makes you want to stay on the couch, or if Game of Thrones is on, right? It will make you want to stay on the couch and order favors. It also makes our runners want to stay on the couch and not run favors. And so we have to figure out how to fight those opposing forces.
You mentioned something about predictive analytics.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? What goes into
Yeah, predictive analytics. So we've been using Facebook Profit is the library we've been using. It's like Facebook published their analytics platform. And we feed our historical data and train our models. So it's like a machine learning built on like seasonality and weird stuff. And then one of the features that we feed into that is the weather forecast, among a lot of other things. And then that tells us how many favors we should expect to get. We also have like other things that check against like just smart people with spreadsheets. And then we kind of combine them, and then those output what our best guess is. And we can predict favor count like to within a couple hundred each day, which is pretty good. We're doing 20,000 a day, so yeah, it's pretty good. Other questions? This is fun. Thanks, guys. Okay, so here's what we did. We decided on the goal. We mapped the user journey. So this is part of the design sprint, is you map your user journey through your products as they exist today, right? And this involves like talking to experts, making sure that there's the expertise in the room. You interview the experts. So this is us interviewing Allison. She's our awesome community manager. She's the person who like supports runners every day. She's like the genius bar of Favor. They have a place on Lavaca where runners come in like, my car doesn't work, and she's like, it's okay, we'll take care of it. So that's Allison. So we interview her about the frustrations, what makes running frustrating, and that sort of stuff. And then we build up these, like we call them how might we notes, but how might we solve these problems? So it's defining the problem a little bit more completely. And you build like a nice, awesome whiteboard of these, or I'm sorry, like a sticky board. And so we have this like conference room. So this is the one thing that design sprints will do. They will wreck whatever room that you're in. So you know, it's like the beautiful mind version of all of these crazy sticky notes everywhere. Then you vote on what you think would probably solve the problem. So it's a lot of like democratization of like voting, and we think this is going to solve here, and this, and the, you know, you spend your dollars on what you think is going to have the biggest impact. And then you select your target. You pick what you're going to work on Wednesday. So that's all Tuesday.
PJ.
Yeah.
So two questions. One is,
you only get one question. Combine them. No, I'm just teasing.
Just like to go. The first thing is, when you're writing the how might we's, were you doing that as a group or individually?
Individually.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is, one of the challenges I find with voting is like, if somebody dots a how might we or whatever you're voting on, how do you like try to prevent that from influencing other people voting?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I actually wasn't in the room when we did this, but Doug's probably be able to answer better. My whole product team was, there's 4 of us. 3 of us were in that room, so my job was to like run interference and keep everybody else out of the room while the team was in there for a week. But that said, how we've done this in the past is you kind of like hold your little dots and you walk around and you decide what you're going to vote on before anybody puts their dots up. And so it's kind of an honor system thing. But you want to make sure that people think through and evaluate by themselves before the wisdom of the masses put all the dots on one thing. Yeah.
Cool.
But it's imperfect. All of this is imperfect. It's designed for speed and like knowledge and not precision.
I think one day is long enough for interviewing.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing with like usability testing. I steal this analogy from Jag, my boss, but he says if you're having a dinner party and you have 8 people over at your house and 5 of them trip over the front step on the way out, you don't need to like get any more information. You know you've got a weird front step. It's like the A/B testing version of that would be like, let's get 1 million people and run them over this step, right? Like you don't need that. You can see the major blockers and the major patterns emerge. For my rule of thumb is after 6 interviews. After 6 interviews, you can see patterns emerge that are going to get you close enough to make some good decisions. And remember, this is imperfect because you're going to show this to users later, and they're going to tell you what you screwed up, which will be lots of things, and that's okay. People think they know what they don't know, mostly internally. So Tuesday we start sketching. And this is really fun because some people are really good at sketching and some people are not really good at sketching, but they all have good ideas. And so it's funny to like to help people evaluate the content of the sketch, not the quality of the sketch. And so these are actually Cooper, our product designer, sketches, so they look just like the app. And he was saying like these are some ideas of like each person through homework decides how they're going to solve this problem through product. So they do this also with isolation. And then you go around and you kind of like vote for things that you like as a team, and then you try to combine them into a like one single prototype that will address at least a few of these ideas. So there's the team voting.
Wait, sorry.
Yeah.
How did you combine them into prototype?
That's the next thing.
Oh,
So
okay.
the next thing, after everyone votes on their piecemeal, this is what I've actually heard you guys refer to this as Frankensteining, but it's much more gentle than that, right? It's like taking the goodness of each of these ideas and figuring out how to put it together in such a way that it's actually going to make sense in the products that you have and actually solve the user problem and not be like, you know, two approaches that don't make sense together. So it's compromising each one of the things to build them together as a whole. And that's what this storyboarding is. So you create a storyboard of the experience that you want to design that's going to test whether or not these are good ideas. Remember, the goal of this is just figuring out whether or not this is a good idea. It's probably not what you're going to build. In fact, if it is what you're going to build, you're probably not trying hard enough. But this is just to validate a direction. So Thursday, they built a prototype. So we use InVision to make our prototypes. Our designers also, with things with higher interactive, like complexity, they use something called Principle, which gives them a little bit more fidelity in terms of making it feel like an app. But the goal is you want to give someone at least enough of an illusion so that they can put themselves mentally in the place of using the app. That's all you need to do, is get them to, a lot of times it can just be stills. Sometimes you have to stitch them together so they feel like we're moving through the app. But it is fake as fake can be. If they tap in the wrong place, nothing happens, right? And that's just how it works. So you have to, it's a guided prototype. It's not some sort of like app. It's definitely not that. It's as little as possible.
Hey, PJ.
Yeah.
Just in motion or like a PowerPoint? Like how low tech?
It can be as low tech as you can get away with.
InVision, excuse me.
Yeah, InVision, InVision is pretty close to PowerPoint. Like, it's not that far off. Like, if you can make a PowerPoint, you can probably make an InVision. So I would encourage you to just use that tool as like the baseline. But I mean, I've shown like you can show paper prototypes to people, and as long as it puts them in the right mindset where they're giving valid feedback, it's cool. Yeah, so you evaluate that based on whatever it is you're working on. For us, we needed it to be an app, to feel like an app. Yeah.
For the mapping the user journey, do you all just kind of do the journey of that summarizes what everyone does as a runner, or do you guys make like personas?
In this case, we generalized a little bit more. In the case where we were doing like a more sophisticated user journey mapping, you definitely need like a persona to capture what the totality is of the use case. But in this case, we kind of simplified it down to like the general runner, right? And that was based on mostly our experience in the room as runners as much as anything else, and then working on the products for long enough, you kind of learn how people use them. Yeah.
Is there a reason why you guys use InVision as opposed to something like Marvel? I'm just kind of curious because in my experience, I know InVision is kind of like, it seems like it's the industry standard for prototyping, but I don't get why they don't have certain fundamental things implemented. Like Marvel, I like because you can do those hotspots.
Yeah.
And you can kind of do a global application of them from one screen to the next. But InVision, unless there's been an update that I don't know about, you have to do it. It's a lot of like repeating.
You know, I'll tell you, man. I shouldn't speak for the team, but I will anyway. They probably just used InVision once and it worked for them, and it hasn't fallen down for them yet. And I'd say that's generally true for our tools. Like, we kind of use them until they break down, and then we evaluate for the next one.
Okay. So it's just kind of like a habit.
Yeah, inertia is probably the right way to think about it. It's like, it kind of, if it's not getting in your way, we don't spend a lot of time evaluating new tools until it's time to evaluate new tools, and at which point we spend a lot of time on it. And we haven't made it to where Envision breaks down, except Cooper, our designer, really wanted to try Principle because he saw a demo of it or whatever, and so he uses that. The decisions are less thoughtful than you would hope for, but like just right for us, you know. Other questions?
I had a question on scheduling. This is a lot that's been fit into just a few days.
Yep.
So is Douglas kind of keeping you guys on it? You've got about an hour to do this and about another 2 hours.
Yeah.
Okay.
Without Douglas, this goes off the rails.
Super
without a Douglas-like figure,
Okay.
this goes off the rails. No, you keep tight time, and you keep people on task, and the hours are really long. That's actually kind of the other hack of design sprints is people are excited about this 1 week special thing, and they kind of bust their butts on it, and they do homework, and it's not draining, it's exciting because you feel like you're doing something like new and interesting.
And then the last question would be, so you've got 2 hours to work on this, and you come up with like 4 good ideas that you can only work on 1. So do you find yourself after the process gathering stuff off the cutting room floor to like use later?
Oh, for sure.
Okay.
Good ideas don't die. I tell my team this all the time. Like, don't worry if we're not working on your thing right now. If it's a good idea, it's going to stick around. We're going to get to it eventually. And good ideas don't die in those rooms. They make their way out, and like a lot of what we're working on right now, even if it's not reflected in this prototype, came to fruition because people were just spending time thinking about one thing for a really long time and being creative, and lots of good stuff comes out of that. Okay, before we keep going? Okay, I'm just going to walk through really quickly some of the stuff that we did prototype. This is actually probably the least important part. But we worked on, right now our runners text using text. We were working on things like in-app messaging to try to limit their context switching. So this is one of the things that we wanted to add. What this opened up was the ability to give them contextual information. We were calling it RunnerBot. But this guy is basically the robot that says, hey, you're showing up at this restaurant, the best place to park is over here, as opposed to it just being notes that are attached to the merchant that a runner has to proactively go to. We can...
So glad you're talking about this right now.
Thanks, man.
So glad. #1 things.
Yeah, this is gonna be real hard to build, but we're gonna get there. This is a way to do like progressive disclosure, and our hypothesis was that runners don't want everything, they just want the things they need right there. And so that was part of the prototype. We revamped navigation of the app, so this is just a way to like, this was something our designer wanted to do. It wasn't something that came out of the prototype, but we needed a new place to fit all this stuff, and so we had to restructure the AI of the app. So we wanted to see whether runners like this. This actually we're building right now. And then there were some context-aware notifications. So this is the idea of like, rather than put the notes of where to park, it's like, hey, it looks like you're going to Velvet Taco. The red parking garage is the best one for this, right? Like, because we have runners going to. Restaurants tend to be in busy places tend to be a pain in the butt to get to, and so our goal is to help runners navigate to these places through like life hacks, right? And the last thing that was super cool, this was like a novel idea that we had never heard before, but because the team was in this creative space, they came up with this thing. They were like, hey, what if we had community in the app? What if there was a way, now that we've got in-app messaging, when you're not running a favor actively right now, what if you could chat with other people who are idle? Because we have hundreds of people on the schedule at any given moment, and they think of themselves as a community. What if we reinforce that community in the app? And so this was another thing that we added to show runners to see whether or not they valued that, or something that they would want in the app, or even made sense to them. But it was a cool hypothesis, a cool insight that came out of just like the process of thinking from, like empathizing with the runners. And then the coolest part was, then we streamlined favor progression, which is like the least interesting thing. It's just like we made the buckets better. So then Thursday while Team A is creating the prototypes, they decided what they're do. Team B, in parallel to that, is creating a testing plan. So coming up with what we're going to ask the users when we bring them in. And then on Friday, we set up a hacky usability testing lab in one of our conference rooms and watched from the other one and showed this to a bunch of runners. And it was awesome because most of the ideas were bad and some of them were really good. And we stopped doing the bad ones and we kept doing the good ones. And it was like a really So I said this at the beginning, but we were doing user testing occasionally at the time, but it's not that, it's one of those things that can fall off, right? It's one of those things that like, oh, I know what the users need and I don't have time to test this and we just got to get this done and I've got the designs and we're just going to go, right? But this helps remind the team of like how awesome it is to get real user feedback so early in the process so that you can just stop working on the things that suck. And so that's, since then, we do this with almost everything we work on. We just, not the 5-day design sprint, but every time we've got something that we're kicking around, an idea, we just spin up a quick prototype. We've got a usertesting.com like enterprise account now where we can either test with runners or consumers, and we just show it to people. And 100% of the time, it shows us some sort of interesting insight that we wouldn't have gained otherwise. And that, like, something is surprising every time. And it's really cool.
Hey, PJ.
Yes?
Did you do any screening for who you interviewed?
Yes. So we have a real convenience here because we have, at any given time, a few hundred people driving around town waiting for us to ask them to do something. So we just get, like, we literally placed a favor that said show up at the office and we're going to tell you about stuff. And we want to hear what you have, and then we tip them $50.
Is that going to be a new service, user research
yes,
by favor?
User research on demand. It's a very specific use case of people. But yeah, it's like when you want to test with runners, it's a super convenient way to do it. And I would say like we hack our way to stuff like that all the time. Consumers are consumers, but runners are a very special breed, and so we need to find good runners.
But in terms of testing the runners, was there any, I guess, filtering of like a new runner versus
yeah. Since we were targeting frustration and earnings, we pulled out like before we placed the favor, we chose the runner from the list of people, and the list of runners that are active tell how many favors they run. So we just removed brand new runners from it because we didn't feel like that they would have enough context to give us good feedback. But that was the only screening. We didn't like look for anything more than that. We tried to just get a random sampling after that. Yep.
How many designers are involved in the design sprint?
Ideally, or in this one?
I guess thank you.
Douglas, how many ideally involved in the design sprint?
I think in a lot of cases one designer is adequate. It really depends on how ambitious you are about the size of prototype that you want to make. In the case of Twyla, we had 3 designers from Google Ventures. We had 2 designers in the design sprint, and then we brought on other resources the day of because we made 3 different prototypes and pitted them all against each other.
Oh wow, that's ambitious. We had 2. I felt like that was fine. It was enough to, and one was more research. So you probably want somebody who knows how to do research to build the research plan, while somebody knows how to do design is designing the prototype. You probably, because those 2 things happen at the same time, and so you probably want at least that skill set in the room. But it doesn't have to be a designer. Other questions? Cool. So our key takeaways, we like counted up the insights, and there were 35 individual insights that we documented and moved forward. So that was super cool. What was fun? So there were 2 things that were fun about that are not intangible and not related to this product. One, everyone who was involved in this design sprint was interested in product in some way or shape or form. Like, I don't know if you guys have this experience, but at our company, we have this thing called internalships, where we like allow someone to shadow our teams for a day. And for whatever reason, analytics and product and design are the 2 that everybody wants to shadow. Everybody wants to like get exposure to those things. And I like to think of because of competent product leadership, but it's really just because it's one of those things that there's no product manager degree, and our team is like, we have one person who's like used to be a carpenter, and one person who used to sell BMWs, and I'm neither of those, sorry. And so you see this as like, oh wow, this is a cool thing that I can do with my career that doesn't take this specialized degree. And so we have lots of people who are always asking, like, what do I need to do to join the product team? And what does product management do? And what does design do? And so this was a great experience to take like some of our A players at the company and just get them more ingrained with product and thinking like product managers. Selfishly, when they're making trade-offs like that, now they know how to approach me better with requests, right? Because they know how to think through a product design. And so that was like a super awesome side effect. And then, yeah, it validated some stuff that we thought was going to work. And then it also like cleared up some misconceptions of like that we would have said were truth, like with high confidence going into that. That runners just basically crapped on the ideas that we thought were really good. And so that was great. Like that's what success looks like, because you only spent a few minutes working on this thing, and sure, like it makes you feel bad because you're like, oh, this was gonna work, and now it didn't work. But you didn't spend 6 months building it to find it out. You found it out in 5 days. So that was all I had. Thank you so much for listening to this. I think we're gonna chat we're gonna do a little chat thing for a minute. But does anybody have any other questions before we move on to like a little chat?
So how do you mentioned right now, like obviously when you put in front of users, they'll tell you everything you missed or you assumed.
Yeah.
So how do you dance around that edge between this is ready for us, we know enough to get into production and get a higher quality, or we need to go back to the drawing board with these and we need to understand much more before we can get it into like, because you mentioned some of these you're already building.
Yeah.
The other ones are further down the line. But how do you decide, like, maybe just your personal opinion, how do you decide this is ready to like?
I've never thought about that. I guess it's kind of obvious when you've done. If you're thinking, is this working, and I'm not really sure, it's probably not. You know what I mean? Like, it's like if you're. I think of it like when you're interviewing a candidate for a role. Like if you're stretching to try to figure out how they're going to fill the role in the position, it's probably not right. When you find the person, you're like, how can I get them on this team? That's who you hire, right? And that's the way I think it is with product design. It's like you naturally will want your designs to work, right? So you're going to find a way to make them the right design. Like that's just human nature. And so, any doubt in your mind is probably just like a crushing like lack of endorsement from whoever your users are. So look for reasons to reject. That's what I would say. Like it's not like that the idea is bad, but this particular implementation is probably not the right one. Yeah.
So you mentioned that you use this design sprint to kind of validate you're headed in the right direction. What might you use if you have like a solution already, but may not be meeting your goals, and you just want to like iterate on it?
Yeah. So in that case, and we do that all the time, that would be like a user test on what we have at the task that we believe is falling short, where our numbers aren't in the right direction. And then you run people through that user test. You have them walk out your front door and you see where they trip. And most of the time, there's a thing that's there. You'll have a hypothesis and you'll see it over and over again and you'll fix it. Some of the time, it's just not obvious, and then it's like an analytics problem. You have to dive into the data. You should always dive into the data, but sometimes it's just easier to show it to some people, and they'll be like you'll watch somebody get confused about the language on a button or whatever. It'll be like, oh, that says calculate. I would have thought that I don't know what that does. And then you're like, well, that's dumb. Of course, it just calculates. And then the second person will be like, what does this calculate button do? And you're like, huh. And then by the third time, you're like, oh, they're going to get hung up on the calculate button. And by the fifth time, you just can't listen to it again. You know? It's like I liken watching usability tests to like watching the same movie over and over again, but with slightly different cuts. And by the end of it, you have to like edit, right? Like it's like exhausting. I go home exhausted because you're paying like super attention to the most boring thing that you know exactly what's going to happen next, right? Yeah.
So after you kind of identify the problem, though, like I think one of the most valuable things about design sprints is like it's that cross-pollination of like solution ideas and kind of making that Franken app.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to figure out how to take that piece of it and inject it more into like lean UX process.
That's tough. I think design sprints are great at big problems.
Yeah.
Like this is a big solution. This is a sledgehammer of a solution. This is a team for a week. That's a long time. And so I want them, like this was a thing that was on the Q4 roadmap, redesigned runner app for like, it was on last year's Q4 roadmap and then it got punted and then got put on this year's Q4 roadmap and it just wasn't getting any thought and attention. And I just wanted to like kickstart that thing and get it going. right?
Pile onto that. Something that you can think about is the note and vote specifically is where that stuff's happening. And so you can apply the note and vote all the time.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And so if you have a 30-minute, say you have an hour-long meeting to make a decision, and there's 5 people in the room, rather than everyone just deferring to whoever's at the whiteboard, have everyone do individual work, and then follow on with the group work and sharing.
Yeah.
So you can get what you want, but you just have to use that.
That's a good point. That's a good point. So the ideation parts of the design sprint, you can just pull those out and use them selectively. That's really good. It's a much better answer than mine.
He's done this before.
What?
He's done it before.
I mean, he's the pro. I'm just like, I've done this twice, and I'm talking to you about how to do it, right? What else?
So how did you guys deal with what I call the sprint high? Like that week or few days following the sprint where everyone's super excited, but they realize that they have stuff they have to do outside of that. They want to stay involved and connected. Because it seems like you, like your product team, takes it after the sprint and you guys take it through the rest of the ropes.
Yeah.
But how do you keep the team that was involved for a week and engaged? That's one thing I've struggled with myself.
That's a problem that I didn't identify, so we didn't solve it. But it probably existed. I probably just alienated some members of the team, and like we just took it back as product, and they were like, "Hey, what's going on over there?" But the benefit is we're like in a super open office. We're pretty tight as like a team, and so they just kind of swing by and ask for updates. But that's a really good question. I never even thought about that. Now I'm worried that I screwed something up.
Well, you guys had that town hall on the Friday of the sprint.
Oh yeah.
So they actually came and shared to the entire organization and what happened, and there's a lot of excitement around that.
Yeah, yeah. It definitely. I can sense the high that you're talking about. They're like they were proud. They were proud of the work they did. It was cool. Yeah, and we just do a demo day every other Friday anyway. It just happen to line up with our demo day.
So like Douglas was saying, where you can kind of like vote on things, and in other words, you can kind of do parts of this process and iterate on other things. Have you noticed that this has affected, say, your social media person, or in other words, other areas where they're starting to integrate this into, well, how are we going to interact with runners face to face, or how are we going to take care of our runners and applying this process as they go? In other words, like micro sprinting, I guess would be the way of instead of doing a whole week-long larger project, but implementing some of that thinking and that process into the day-to-day.
Yeah, I mean, it's like anything else. When you see something that works, you kind of like add it to your toolbox, right? You're like, oh, I'm going to use this again someday. And I'm sure that the brainstorming techniques, like I don't spend a lot of time with the social media team on their brainstorming activities, but I do see, now that you mention it, I'm like oblivious to shit like this, but now that you mention it, in the office, I see white or sticky notes with little dots on them sometimes, right? It's like, oh yeah, look at that, they're doing the voting thing. But it's probably through some game of like design sprint telephone, started there, got to this person, they did it, got to this person, and now it's become a way that we do things as a company. We're little enough that those ideas spread pretty quickly. We're all like 2 degrees from each other.
Cool. So I think because of all the questions, people have been here for a while.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of the questions I was going to ask during the interview have been asked.
Yeah.
One thing I'm still curious about though is how the acquisition has affected the way you build products, and what does it look like for the future?
Oh yeah, great question. So the HEB acquisition has been like the best thing. It was like the coolest day of my career by a lot. We had this great company come in, and like, I don't know, I never heard anybody say like, oh, I'm a Randall's man or whatever, like that.
HEB
People
for life.
love HEB. It's crazy. And like, I loved HEB and kind of knew it, but didn't really know it until they bought us, right? But it was like one of those things where it's just like a little bit different and a little bit cool and fun and again, oblivious, but I never really kind of pieced it together. Other than, this was after we were in talks with them and kind of partnered with them, so I had like kind of an inside connection. But when Hurricane Harvey hit, they were like this amazing force of good. Like, rolled semi-trucks down to Victoria and were making thousands of meals overnight. And I was, like, myself and one of our operations managers were in charge of our Hurricane Harvey relief efforts, and we just felt like weak and sad. You know, like, it was just like, look at these guys, look what they're doing, and we're like dropping off like buckets from Home Depot at like relief centers, which was like awesome, and it felt really good, except we watched what HEB did, and we're like, damn, that's how you do this thing. So they came along, and they're a 113-year-old company. They've never acquired another company before, much less like a weird little tech company like us. And so they've been just super careful at making sure that they don't smother us with love. And so the first thing that HEB did was like, hey, listen, cool, you guys have been profitable and operating profitably. Don't worry about that anymore. How fast can you grow? How fast can you get they said 100% market share, and we were like, we don't know what that means. And so we went through like, let's just grow real fast. Let's get to $100 million real fast. How fast can you do it without breaking? And so we proposed a plan, and they were like, cool, do that. And now we're executing against it. And so all it did in the short term was just accelerate what we were already doing. Now the things that have happened since then have been really cool. One was we launched in Corpus Christi as part of our plan. HEB is like really great in Corpus Christi. They brought us in and like kind of like treated us like their little sibling. And they were like, hey, we're with these guys. And Corpus Christi just like blew up. Like, it was our best launch ever because we had this like trusted brand that said like, these guys are cool, don't worry about them, they're with us. And we just saw it like overnight in the numbers. So we've been taking like advantage is a strong word, but like we're doing stuff like HEB sponsors the minor league baseball team there, so they put a favor shirt on a kid and have him deliver the starting lineup before every game. Like stuff we would never get to do. That's super cool that we get from HEB. And then from the product side of things, we see HEB as like a strategic advantage that we have against other delivery companies. So a couple of weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, let's say, Amazon launched beer and wine delivery in Texas. And we had that on our roadmap, but it was kind of like down at the bottom of the roadmap. And so we just decided to pull it up. And we would never be able to do that because there's this nice little organization in town called the TABC that has very strong opinions about what you do with alcohol. And we were like dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's and doing everything right. But when you're delivering wine and beer for yourself, you can do all kinds of cool stuff. And so HEB had bought us, we were a wholly owned subsidiary, so we were technically part of HEB. So we just got to like fast track that thing, and we did it in like a week, which was so cool. So that's the other thing that has happened is we've gotten some more raw materials that we wouldn't have otherwise had. But we still get to deliver from Target and Randall's and Kroger and all those other crappy places, Walmart. Is that good?
Yeah, and my only other question is, what kind of evergreen changes do you think happened to the team after going through a design sprint?
Oh yeah, so I said I marked the day, like it's like Anno Domini and BC, right? It's like this is the day that we did the design sprint. So it was so cool because I feel like our design team is great. They're like uber talented, but relatively green, you know? And I was trying to like before kind of like convince them that we should do more user testing. We did the design sprint and then they're pulling me. Like they're the ones who like got the usertesting.com stuff going and pushed it all the way through. They're the ones fighting for budget. They're telling me like we can't do this. We've got to user test it 2 more times. It's so awesome. So that's like the main thing that I've seen is like that user feedback is addictive. And once you have it, it's almost like it's like a crutch. You can't live without it. But it just makes all of our designs better. And then the other thing I would say is like it just we're running a design sprint now. I don't think I told you this. We're running a design sprint now a quarter. So Meg is like she's taking the role of the Douglas and facilitating a design sprint cross-functionally. And so our next one, our new one is scheduled for next week. I'll come back and talk to you about how it went, but it's gonna go great. It's awesome. But that's the other thing. Like we're just building it into our process of something that we do, just because the team. And I didn't ask them to do this. They were like, we just need to do this again. We need it. Like they saw so much value in it that they wanted to do it again. And it's like, okay, if you want to do a bunch of work, go ahead. You know, I'll stand outside the room and keep everybody out for a week again. Any other questions? Yeah.
Do you have different runner personas, and if so, how do you design for different types of runners?
So the answer to that is slightly different than did we develop personas for the use case. No, we didn't use personas for that, but yes, we do have different type of runner personas, and we don't like design different paths. It's not as formal as you would think, but we just try to like think about, like, it's not like what would Jerry think about this and what would Ann think about this, but it's more like, hey, remember there are some runners who run as a side gig, there are some runners who do this for their full time, there's some people who are just trying to support their families, and so we through anecdotal versions, we just kind of like check the boxes to make sure this will work for the runners, because you only get one version of the app, and so we need to make sure it works for everybody and doesn't hurt anybody. Yeah.
I have a question. Like one of the most annoying things about like favor. I love favor.
That's not a question, sir.
I wonder if you guys have ever like thought about adding like Google Tracker to be able to keep track of the runner, where they're at, what part of the town they're at. So like, you know, say you're busy, you're just always doing stuff. You kind of want to go here while your runner's doing this, so you can see where they're at.
Oh yeah.
Do it real quick, and kind of like Uber, you can keep track of the driver when they're coming to you.
Yep.
So I was wondering if you guys are ever going to implement a feature like that.
Super common request. Yeah. Right now we do like an estimated time of arrival, but we don't do we don't put them on a map. This is more out of respect for the runner, because sometimes we ask them to drop off 2 orders. Shh, don't tell anybody. Like one on the way to you, and we pad the delivery time, and so like they'll pick up like 2 orders of tacos, and they'll drop one off at this house and one off at that house, and so
have multiple orders going on.
Yeah, yeah. It's just like when it's an efficient order, when it doesn't add more than 3 minutes to the drive, and so that's why we don't do that. Internet. Yeah.
How do you balance like gathering, discovering feedback from your customer base versus your runner base?
We tend to go in like surges, so we'll decide. We're a seasonal business. Sometimes we have too many runners. Sometimes we have too many customers. We know when that's going to happen, and so we try to design a quarter ahead of that, so that we've got a new solution for demand when we need it, and a new solution for supply when we need it. That's how we talk about it internally. And so it's just when it's time to work on those things, that's when we gather our feedback. If that weren't the case, it would be 75% runner, 25% customer, and that's just because runners like a good runner solves everything, and a bad runner ruins everything. You know, like there's nothing I can do from tech to make up for the fact that the runner forgot your salad dressing, but I could have the menu wrong, the hours wrong, the place wrong, all that stuff, and a great runner is going to figure out a way to get you what you want, and you're going to be happy. And so that's why we focus on the runner. Yeah.
So you mentioned right now that your team is trying to incorporate this as part of like their regular process.
Mm-hmm.
So how are you guys dealing with balancing between the new cool stuff, adding on new features, versus improving the ones that either you already have from the initial sprint, or things that you already had in the roadmap that we need to fix this, and also this?
We're pretty good. The best place I've ever been at not being distracted by bright, shiny objects. We're like, our business is so hard and so complicated, we have so many problems with what exists already, that I actually have to like convince the team to do new stuff sometimes. So most of our stuff is like, we have these, like, our constituents, like, you're not the first person today to tell me what's annoying about Favor, just a spoiler alert. Our teams, our runners and our customers are so engaged, and they're so loud, and they're great. It's like amazing, but you don't have to like look very far to find massive problems to solve. And so that's kind of how we it's just like whatever big problem we've decided to try to solve. We only get to do maybe 3 or 4 a year, so.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah.
How often are you looking at other like competitor apps or similar businesses, and like, are you ever taking any inspiration from those, like an Uber Eats or TaskRabbit?
Yeah, I try to order from those services relatively regularly, just to like see what they're up to. So like, let's say if I were to put a number on it once a quarter, I also run for competitors, and I have a 19-year-old son who runs for some competitors and gives me some competitive intel, so he's my man. So yeah, often. And I don't think there's any, like, there's no harm in that. Like, Uber is brilliant, and they're powerful, and they're resourced. Like, I interviewed somebody from Uber recently. There are 180 core product teams that, like, last time I talked to them, right? 180 core product teams. So that's like product manager, product designer, lead, engineering lead, like that thing. Those guys are like, if they're doing it, they've probably tested it. like we can shortcut our way to good design by just like stealing some of their good stuff. I don't think there's any shame in that. Like, we have enough problems to solve. We don't have to figure out like how, like, if they've got a great solution for this interaction, we'll just start there. No sense in like hiding your eyes from it.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, so we're talking a lot about product and from a product perspective, so you've also got a platform. I guess it's like connecting this marketplace.
Yeah.
So is there a separate team running that? Does it basically just get informed by you as the manager of the product?
Yeah.
Is it a constraint in the design sprint, I guess is the underlying
no.
question.
So the platform is there to support the products. That's the way we think of it. And so it's not like a thing in and of itself, although we should evolve to that someday. We don't have like Amazon Web Services and delivery, right? We have like our back end. And so our back end is there to make our front end go. And so most of the problems start with the user, go through the front end, and then we decide what we need to do to the platform in order to make it work. This is a constrained line of thinking, not the best line of thinking, but it's just the way that we operate. Yeah. So the short answer is yes, we're responsible for that too.
Out of curiosity, what took so long for Favor to develop a desktop version? I don't personally use a desktop often, except well, when I'm in office. That's really it. But
Yeah.
I'm just curious, like, if there was like a resistance or something.
So that was me. I was the reason that Favor didn't do a desktop version for so long. It was more like, the analogy that I used was like when you make a new product, it's like getting a puppy, right? You have to feed it, you have to nurture it, you have to take it to the vet. It's like, it's not just like a feature that you can put on and take away. Once you have a new product, you have that new product. And so, and we're a Texas-only company, so SEO is hard for a regional player. And so I'd done some research, and I was like, the opportunity just isn't as high as it should be. Then we released it, and then it went gangbusters, and so of course wrong all the time.
Is it really popular now?
Yeah, it's doing great, especially on weekdays during lunchtime for people at the office like you. So yeah, it was a bad idea to not do it. But what took so long was like, we had 2 front-end engineers and all of our internal tools were on fire, and I was like, we cannot have any more puppies until we feed the ones we have. But our CEO beat me into it. He beat it out of me. Like, he beat me up until it happened. Really, like, it was me versus him, and he won, and he should have. That's why he's the boss, and I'm the lackey.
So what excites you the most about Favor's future?
Oh man, what excites me the most? We are finally to the point where we have changed the tires and rebuilt the engine on the car, going 60 miles an hour down the highway. Like, I have for one of the first times, like, I can say a defensible product stack. Like, it's awesome. And so, so now we get to build new stuff. We don't just have to replace everything that was on fire. So that's super cool. Not being worried about dying every minute because we're funded is also really nice. So now like I lay in bed awake at night, not worrying about whether or not we're going to make payroll, but now worrying about whether or not we're going to screw this thing up because we have something kind of special and awesome. And so the biggest challenge, I think, is going to be figuring out, every company that I've been that's tried to grow too fast has succeeded at growing too fast and screwed themselves up. And I don't want to do that. And so that's what I'm most excited about, is figuring out with this like team of people how to grow into a better company than we were, as opposed to a worse company. Because there's a reason I work for startups. I don't like big dumb companies, and I don't want to build one. So we're just not going to do it. We're going to refuse to be a big dumb company. We're going to be a smart, awesome company. Yeah. So that's like it's like a very internal focused thing, right? Like, of course I want to get tacos there faster, but I'm really like, right now at this stage of my career, I'm really like interested in building a great team. Yeah.
What tool do you use for product road mapping for all of your 15 products?
It's a very sophisticated tool. It's called Google Spreadsheets. Yeah, so what we do is we stack rank everything, and then I have this like crazy template for sprint by sprint plans that we use. Haven't found anything that's any good. If you find anything, please email me and let me know. Like I've tried a bunch of stuff, and it just, where it breaks down is the level of fidelity, right? Like I can't have a level of fidelity that is good for the executives to view, and then good enough for the team to give them enough information to execute. So we have to kind of like build that through linked spreadsheets, which sucks. And then at the bottom of it, it's Jira. But no one, you don't ever want your executives in Jira. Never, never. All right, last question.
Last question.
Oh, well, 2 more. We'll do 2 more. These last 2. Go.
What techniques are you using to brand and market your service to both the runners to apply for opportunities and also users that are using the service to receive the products?
Name it, we're trying it, you know? So for runners, we tend to go to where people are looking for jobs. Think Craigslist, Indeed, those types of platforms. And then for consumers, it's just wherever hungry people are, which is kind of everywhere. And so we do a lot of the traditional stuff like Facebook ad buying and you know, Pandora ads do pretty well for us, and you know, billboards. But the strategic advantage we have there is we have all these merchant partnerships for local trusted businesses in the market that we're in. So a lot of our marketing comes through recommendations from the merchants that say, hey, you want our food but at home? Just use these guys. These guys are cool. We're good with them. And so there's very little that can be as effective as a strong reference. Yeah. So that's what we try to do, is encourage those.
Yeah. So are you guys going to actually implement those features that y'all came up with this spring?
Yeah, we've got a, like, I'll tell you what. We'll
like
tell
the
you.
one that helped the guys to be able to navigate like where to go in a building.
The bot.
Yeah.
Yeah, runner bot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, first we have to build the content for it, and so we've got a initiative to build like more runner helpful content that won't show up as like a sweet bot because we don't have in-app messaging yet. But yeah, so we're building. Let's see, in-app messaging, yes. Runner bot someday. Revamp navigation now.
Yeah, I feel like that's one of the toughest things for a runner is when they go to a building like this, like where the hell do I go? What elevator do I use? What do I push? Blah,
Yeah,
blah,
you should,
blah.
like I run favors, man. I know. It's like I deliver to, like you deliver to a hospital and they're like, yeah, I'm on the 8th floor in the maternity ward, and you're like, where the hell is that? And where do I park? Yeah, it's super fun.
Yeah, where do I park? Can I park in here? Do I have to pay? All that
Yeah,
stuff.
it sucks.
Yep.
It sucks. Yeah, those are the things. So here's the problem. How many addresses exist in Texas? How do we know how to upload? Like, how do we build a database of this information of where do you park for free at every hospital in Texas? Like, it can be done. Like, I love the example of like Google Maps. There was some product manager at Google that was like, how about if we put a camera on top of a car and drive every street ever? And like, imagine somebody on your team came to you and said that, you'd be like, okay, shut up, right? We're just gonna drive every street, like the ones in Indiana too, like all of them. We're gonna drive all those streets, and they're like, yeah, I mean, we're just gonna put cameras on cars and drive everywhere, right? And that's kind of our equivalent. It's like we're just gonna have to go to every place and figure out where to park, and then put it in the database. Yeah, it's just like it's gonna take a lot of going to places and figuring out where to park.
It's like when you put like in your account, you can only put so much instructions.
Yeah.
Until you can't type anymore. So
Yeah.
like my thing is like.
Dude, you're a power user. Stick around.
I'm hardcore. So my thing is like I'm facing towards the W, pull into this garage, go down here, get your ticket, come up to the street level, push the elevator for all this, and I can't type all that in the instructions.
Dude,
so
you need to live in a simpler place.
So sometimes
go down to the street and meet those poor people.
Sometimes I'll text the runner the entrance of the building and point arrows so they can know.
That's amazing.
So you know what I mean?
No,
in the
seriously,
meantime,
like
just in the app, when they hit over that limit, just say, you need to move. Like,
yeah. No, man, just text, like build a little picture and text it to your runner when they're on their way.
That's what I do.
They love that stuff. That's brilliant.
Point arrows, there's an entrance right here, entrance right
you
here,
sketch.
blah, blah, blah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, so I was just going to comment, like, I think you have, since you were mentioning that you have a very engaged community, I feel like you you have a big opportunity to crowdsource, because I mean,
For
it might
sure.
be a stranger.
Yeah.
I mean, it might be a strange place for the runner. But if you work, for example, here, for you it's like, dude, like use this, park here, like two blocks down there, like the meter maid never goes by, so like don't worry as long as you're short. Because I feel like trying to build it yourself, is gonna take a lot of manpower. Probably not gonna be perfect because once again, like how many addresses are there?
Yeah, we just started to crowdsource menus because that's the other thing that's like a huge challenge for us. That like, how do you keep every price of every like side of fries up to date in every restaurant in Texas, right? So that's the first thing that we're crowdsourcing. But the runner tips is another one that we're looking at ways to engage runners. Yeah.
But if you gave them favorite credits, you would like
Favorite credits for the consumers?
Yeah.
That's a really good idea. Okay, yeah, we'll do that.
That's true.
We're gonna do that. Actually, we've got this great idea. We're gonna give favorite credits for telling you where to park. That's so smart. What else? Okay. Thank you guys so much for.
And just make a quick shout out. We'll see you all next month. Can I make a quick shout out for next month's meetup? There was a lot of questions about prototyping of why use InVision, how do you manage design, versioning, how we collaborate at Voltage Control. So come check it out August 1st, right?
Yeah.
And we're going to do a live workshop. If you're not a designer, it's valuable for you to see how designers on your team might work. If you're a designer, you might learn some cool tips and tricks of how to do design sprints better.
What's it called again?
The tools or
the name of the workshop, so I can.
It'll be this meetup next month. So August 1st, Austin Design Sprint, and we're still working on the title, but I think it'll be something along the lines of lightning prototype or something.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Awesome.
So I wanted to say, instead of thinking in terms of the future, think of it. Thank you. You have great answers, and you're very good at engaging the audience.
I don't, but I'm just
Instead of thinking in terms of the future, think of it in terms of what goal are we trying to accomplish? Are we trying to increase the usage of shopping lists? Are we trying to attract more users? Like, what is that goal?
Because I was subscribing to one of the
Could be a couple goals actually.
when they write that book.
One is that talking to a customer, it's like, what is their goal? How they should accomplish.
Because I was subscribing to them.
sometimes they can grab your
Check out your
Exactly.
Yeah.
What problem is the shopping list?
I gotta take off, Douglas. I'll see you, man.
That was one thing that
Talking about what a customer
down thing. We need to subscribe to that site where you find this work.
Why should I change this in an article?
Yeah, but I mean, I talked to, I talked to Kirby, and he said fast.
I work for a pretty small company.
I didn't believe that.
And we do like drafting things. We take our customers and we don't really work on them with them for 2 weeks. But this made me I wanted to put people in perspective.
I really enjoy this.
I wonder because then you really like get like the very best ideas and the most important ideas, and that would really
My place is pretty
start.
simple.
That's what it really started with.
You're like a really
And then we actually store company here. A lot of things that you want, but it's like that day that we spent everything
Little bit of things.
You know, it's
What you guys customers, you're gonna just not validate with that.
But if you had a copy, you don't remove that.
That's why I like
let's say
probably like this. And the fact that it's body too.